What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. So today we are taking a quick look at a comparison between two comprehensive string libraries, Pacific from Performance Samples and CSS from Cinematic Studio Series. Now, both of these libraries have kind of a similar approach in terms of creating a full string package that has multiple articulations, but also kind of caters to the more romantic style of music where the legato has an emphasis, there's a lot of passion and motion in the samples, and I personally love using both of these libraries for my music because of that kind of niche that it fills. And so I just wanted to quickly run through the differences between these two libraries today, give you a quick overview of the sound, and then maybe by the end of this, you can kind of decide whether one or the other is right for you. So with that being said, let me quickly dive into the patches. If you do want at any point to download my sample library buyer's guide, where I share all of my recommendations, not just for strings, but also for the rest of the orchestra, winds, brass, and percussion, and a whole bunch of other groups as well, I would love to give it to you absolutely free. If you want to click the first link in the box below, you can download it as my gift to you for checking out this video. I've also included the prices and utilities for the libraries so you know how to use them practically, and it's all free. So yeah, you can check it out whenever you want to, and I would love for you to have it just as kind of like an accompanying guide whenever you're on the market for a new sample library. So with that being said, let's kind of dive in. Pacific, first of all, is kind of separated into multiple patches. So as far as I know, there are no dedicated multi-patches with multiple articulations included within. Rather, what you get are more or less single patches. So for example, if we open the library Pacific, you look into instruments, you get the different sections there. And then when you click into there, you get all the different articulations that you can drag and choose from. And there's pros and cons to this approach. Naturally, with more patches, it's going to be a little bit messier because you have to kind of choose which articulation you want. But then the pro is also that there is less RAM or less samples, fewer samples that are loaded into the patch. And so as a result, it takes up less CPU processing power. One other thing to note is that this library is not Contact Player compatible, so you do need the full version of Contact to run Pacific, Vista, Conmodo, whatever it is. And for CSS, it is Contact Player friendly. So if you have the free version of Contact, you can also you can purchase CSS or any of the other CS libraries, and those will run seamlessly in Contact. Okay. That being said, let's quickly dive in. So let's hear a bit of Pacific first. We'll hear the 16 violins legato, then we'll switch over to CSS and we'll see what the difference is. Here we go. All right, so strictly comparing the legato, it's really interesting. I feel like Pacific has a slightly bigger sound. I think it's because the section size is a little bit larger. CSS, you can definitely hear a bit more of the single players coming through the ensemble, so that's kind of nice. It definitely delivers a little bit more of a chamber sound. Also, the samples are a little bit more clean in general, whereas Performance Samples Pacific feels like it's almost embracing the sound a little bit more, right? Their motto is not for purists, right? So you're not going to get the cleanest, most sterile sound. It actually encapsulates a lot of the room sound into the samples, and you really get that passion coming through, which is so nice. And one thing to note that is important is that I believe Pacific comes with one legato style, and it's more of a slurred legato. So there might be moments where you find it's not really applicable to certain lines because the legato transitions are maybe a little bit too pronounced. Whereas CSS actually comes with multiple legato speeds. There's like slow, medium, and fast, depending on how fast you play, how hard you play. The engine kind of adapts to your playing style. So that's a big plus there as well. But Pacific does have a lot of raw emotion in it too. So both CSS and Pacific, I would consider hyper romantic in the regard that they really do have a lot of emotion in every single sample. It's a lot of vibrato, a lot of passion in every single note. So yeah, it's great in that sense. Let's quickly move on to some of these other articulations as well. So we have the marcatos in Pacific. This is what this sounds like. Just really snappy. I told you before in previous videos that the marcato patch is one of my favorites because it acts as a general staccato patch really, really well, but it also doubles as a really great accented sustain patch where you can play the notes, hold them as long as you want, and it will carry on until you actually let go of the notes, which is so useful and gives you a lot of instant gratification. Speaking of which, let's take a look at CSS marcato patch. I'm going to turn off the legato here and let's see what we get. Okay, so I think out of all the different patches in the respective libraries, the marcato patch probably differs the most in terms of function. We just saw how Pacific is essentially a pretty simple patch in that it has a really strong accent to the note and then also holds on for as long as you want, whereas CSS, there's a spiccato overlay which turns on because if you think of the word marcato in Italian, it literally means marked, a marked note. So it's a more emphasized beginning of the note. And for CSS, instead of having a recorded sort of more accented sustain, what they do is they add a spiccato on top of the regular sustain. So if you turn it off, the attack is actually not going to be as strong, right? So there's a bit of that not fakery, but there's a bit of that engine working to create that sort of simulated marcato. But where this patch really shines, in my opinion, is when you turn on the legato and you play like faster runs. So this patch, kind of like Pacific, it holds indefinitely, but the legato transitions become a lot more agile. And so although this library CSS doesn't have a dedicated runs patch, the marcato patch with a legato does that beautifully. And they've actually done updates in the past to actually make this even more agile and make it more realistic. And I think it does a really good job. Whereas Pacific does not have a dedicated runs patch. And again, it's limited to one legato style, which if you like the aesthetic, then it can serve you perfectly. But CSS is a little bit more flexible in that regard, having the runs sort of mode there. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We have pizzicatos. We'll go a little bit faster here. Right. Pretty nice, yeah. So again, CSS has a little bit more of a cleaner sound. I feel like Pacific resonates a little bit more in the hall, and you definitely hear more of that room noise as well. And yeah, in terms of the programming, you'll notice how CSS has multiple short notes basically mapped to the one shorts patch. So you have spiccato, which is the shortest note, with staccatissimo, staccato, and sforzando, and that's adjusted by mod wheel. So CSS naturally has a few more articulations, but Pacific also has the whisper sustains, which CSS does not have. So that's kind of cool too. Speaking of the whisper sustains, let's actually hear those a little bit here in Pacific. Really, really pretty. I think the closest thing that CSS has is either the harmonics or maybe anything else, actually. Let me see. Maybe the sustain like concertinos, but even so, the harmonics are probably the closest thing we get. Right, so it's really pretty, but even so, it has a very distinctive harmonics sort of sound, whereas Pacific, I don't really know what other articulations are being used there for that wispy sort of evocative sound. I really like it. Okay, let's hear some spiccatos here in Pacific as well. Okay, and let's hear them in CSS. All right. What's really cool is in CSS, you notice how the tail for the spiccato cuts off pretty early, so you actually don't get that much of a release sample. Whereas in Pacific, you get the release sample, which sounds awesome, but then you also get kind of a pre-attack sample as well. And that's because the sampling approaches for these have been pretty different, I believe. CSS probably recorded each note one at a time, whereas Pacific or Jasper Performance Samples recorded them as a pattern of sequenced repeated notes probably, and then chopped up the performances and gave them to us here in the form of these spiccatos. So a different approach, but in the context of fuller mix, both of these can work really, really well. And then one more here, let's just hear some tremolos from Pacific. Here we go. And in CSS. Yeah, in terms of the tremolos, it feels like Pacific has a little bit more intensity and grit in those samples compared to CSS. But one thing I really do like about CSS is that really for any of the long articulations, you can trigger a scripted legato with, obviously with the exception of the regular legato, which is multi-sampled, but for the other long articulations, you basically have the option to turn on legato for them if you want to. Even the tremolos and the trills and the harmonics, I don't think those are sampled legatos, but the scripted, it's still really useful if you want to lead the line in any of those articulations, which is nice. So yeah, that's kind of the violins comparison. Let's just quickly go through the cellos as well. I think violins and cellos are pretty good benchmark for, different libraries. So let's hear the CSS cellos this time. Let's play the legato a bit first. And then Pacific cellos. Yeah, so pretty similar to the violins, the cellos have quite a big difference here in the legato approach. I do feel that the Pacific cellos have more intensity, more direction in terms of the the aesthetic they're trying to go for in this case. Comparing them side by side, the CSS cellos feel a bit more neutral to me, and there's a bit less passion compared to the Pacific ones. And of course, the legato transitions in Pacific are again more pronounced than CSS, which is adaptive as well. Okay, let's hear some of these other articulations. First of all, the marcatos and the cellos in Pacific. Man, I can't get over how good that sounds. Okay, let's hear the marcato in the CSS as well. Turn off the legato, have the spiccato overlay on. Yeah, and this articulation in general, like these shorts, I think this is really where the differences between the halls come into play as well. CSS really has that studio sound. I mean, it's in the name, right? Pacific, that hall, the larger sounding hall at least, really gives you that encapsulated, epic, cinematic sort of sound compared to the more controlled sound that the studio series has, I think. So in terms of marcatos, I think Pacific definitely wins in that regard. Let's hear some pizzicatos here from Pacific. All right, so then we have the sordinos. Let me just check. Sordino sustains, yes, in Pacific. Beautiful. Let's hear them in CSS as well. There we go. So while CSS has more articulations, the sordino, consordino is simulated, whereas Pacific actually recorded true consordino, I believe. So that is a little difference there as well. Let's hear some of the whisper sustains here. Oh, let's hear, let me see if we have anything else. Yes, we have some spiccatos. Let's hear that first. Pacific. And then the spiccatos here in CSS. Yeah, definitely a lot snappier and shorter than the ones in Pacific, I think. Okay, tremolos in Pacific. CSS. There we go. And then some whisper sustains in Pacific. And finally, the one thing that Pacific does have that CSS does not is clusters. So this is applicable to all the different sections. Let me just play the cello ones here. Right. So kind of a cool effect if you're, writing a thriller score, horror score, whatever, you have those options there as well. But yeah, overall, quick comparison. Hopefully that kind of gave you some ideas. Just to quickly recap my personal thoughts, I could see myself using both libraries on a regular basis. Strictly practically though, because CSS is a contact player library, and it's just really easy for me to go into my libraries tab and literally see the library right there. I can just, drag and drop the library in. Plus the fact that it's also all the articulations are pretty much loaded into the one patch. It's pretty easy to key switch between them. I personally don't mind key switches myself. I do them all the time, and it just keeps my DAW a little bit cleaner when I'm working, right? Or Specific, again, it's not contact player friendly, so you do need the full version of contact, but the overall approach is more split out in terms of the patches, so you really only drag in whatever you need to. And if that workflow gels for you as well, definitely do so. But both of these libraries are wonderful in what they serve to do, I personally believe. In terms of standouts, I think the legato for both libraries is great. I think the approach that they go with is a little bit different, right? So CSS is a little bit more neutral in the fact that there's more adaptive speeds for whatever situations, where Specific has a more focused sort of approach in that sense. And it's more on the slurred side of things rather than a very fast legato. So that's the aesthetic you're going to be purchasing when you grab Pacific. And there are also some other articulations that work really, really well. Pacific is not quite as comprehensive, I think, compared to CSS in terms of the articulation set. But what they do include are done very, very well, especially the marcatos and the whisper sustains, which I could definitely see myself using a little bit more in the future. But there we go. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions, and I would love to hear which library you prefer out of both of these when you kind of listen to these back and forth. Maybe one stands out to you as being more passionate or more suitable for your liking. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And again, if you don't have my sample library buyer's guide yet, it's completely free. It's got all of my personal recommendations in there, and these are ones that, again, I use regularly. Almost every single day, and I want to give it to you completely free as a gift for checking out this video today. So if you click the first link below, you can grab it, and yeah, you can keep it on hand as kind of like a buyer's guide when you're on the market for something new. This will be the guide to go to for you. So thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll catch you in the next one, and take care. Bye-bye.